All right. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar presentation today. My name is Gareth Dyke, and we are going to be talking in this presentation about boosting your citations and managing research impact. Let's get started then. Let's start thinking about how this can be done. How can you manage your citations and maximize your research impact? We will talk about impact, research impact, and how you can measure it. And then we will talk, secondly, about how you can maximize your research impact. I will provide you with some tips and some tricks and some insights from my own research and from our experience working with international publishers, including our colleagues at Bentham Science Publishers, in order to understand citation maximization. The point of all of this is to help you be more effective as an academic, writing and publishing up your own research. Well, let's begin by talking about why you should publish your research at all. It's important to consider that as career stages develop, motivations for publishing also change. At earlier career stages, masters or PhD students, you may be publishing to gain your degree, to get your master's or your PhD degree, whereas later in your career, you may be publishing to get promoted, to develop research and development, or indeed to get funding. And it's important as a starting point for our presentation today to consider the fact that your motivations will be quite different to the motivations of editors and reviewers. And don't forget that the most important people in the whole process of academic publishing are your readers. We don't write papers, do we? So that we can just stick them on the wall of our offices. We write papers so that readers will read them and readers will use them. So that's the key to citations, making sure that people know about your paper, making sure that people are engaged to read your paper, and therefore they will cite your paper. So this is why it's important to boost your citations. This is one measure of academic impact, and it remains the key way that academic researchers around the world are assessed by their institutions, by their research organizations. So journal selection can be key in this process, and many successful academics, they think, I never start to write until I've decided on a target journal. Every journal's different. You may be writing a full article, a letter, a rapid communication. What kind of journal, what sort of journal will your next research project just finished be suitable for? How can you target effectively at a journal that will ensure that your research has maximum reach? Talk to people, talk to colleagues, talk to editors, make those pre-submission inquiries. There's nothing stopping you from writing emails to 5, 10, 15 potential journals before you even start to write, so that you can line up a journal that will be suitable as an outlet for your research. Have a look at the journals that our colleagues, Bentham Science Publishers, are releasing. Many open access journals, many traditional journals, many with impact factors. So Bentham Science Publishers would be one good option for you as you think about target journal selection. Now, as we've discussed in previous webinars in this series, if you didn't get the chance to watch them, jump onto the Bentham Science Publishers YouTube channel or check out some of the other videos on this, our Top Edit YouTube channel. Have a look at journal selection. Consider impact factor, consider reputation, consider reach within the field, and potentially consider open access. These are the kinds of issues, the kinds of topics that researchers try to take into account when selecting a journal. And of course, citations. Who reads, who cites your article remains at the heart of academic impact. Researchers count papers. We look at impact factors. We look at R indices and H indices. And of course, institutions do this as well. Like it or not, this is still, citations are still the main way that researchers are assessed. So let's have a think about this for a bit. How does your research circulation translate to impact? How many researchers are actually going to read and are actually going to cite your next paper? It's very important to consider this, especially because impact as a citation metric is not even across different academic disciplines. And I can see that we have colleagues watching this presentation from all over the world and from all different academic disciplines. If you are a scientist working in health sciences, engineering, agriculture, then coverage of your journals in databases like Scopus, upon which these impact factors are based, we'll see in a minute how that works, you're going to be quite happy probably to be assessed based on impact factor. Whereas some other fields, as you can see here, social sciences, arts, humanities, business and law, these are less covered by these databases. So people often complain about citations as a metric in different research fields. So what is citation analysis? Put simply, this is a way of measuring the impact of an author, an article, or a publication by counting the number of times that that author, that article, or that publication has been cited by other works. And we're going to talk in this presentation today, brought to you by our company, by Top Edit, by Diffusion Editing, and by Bentham Science Publishers, about how you can maximize your citations, how you can drive up your citation rate as an academic author. However, let's begin by talking about the different kinds of tools that people use. And if you're not familiar with these kinds of tools, I strongly encourage you to become familiar with how Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, and tools like ORCID IDs assess and rank and consider publications. We are picking journals that are databased, I hope, in one of these main databases. We are picking journals, I hope, or at least you should be, that are peer-reviewed, that are in reputable databases, Directory of Open Access Journals, Scopus, Web of Science, and so on. These are first steps towards maximizing your citation rate by picking journals that are databased in reputable places that other people will be able to access, that other researchers, other colleagues will be able to find. It's all about discoverability. It's all about search engine optimization. And it's all about making sure that other researchers in your network and beyond are able to find your research. So let's have a think about why you might need citation analysis. We think as researchers, as academics, who is citing my work? Who cited a particular paper? What are the most cited papers in particular subject areas? And we use these kinds of tools to determine which are the best journals in our fields. Which journals should we be selecting? And of course, institutions, universities, research centers, they use these kinds of analyses, these kinds of metrics to justify appointments and requests for funding. So the first step in maximizing your citations then is to make sure that you are selecting an appropriate journal for your next research project. Put time into this, understand the difference between open access journals, traditional journals, green and gold, open access, all these different kinds of journals that are out there around the world. There are many, of course. You have a big choice. So let's put some time into journal selection as the first step towards maximizing our citations. And don't forget that citation indexes track references in the bibliographies of published papers. And so this provides us with a way to search and analyze the literature. This also enables users to gather data on journal impact, assess particular areas of research activity, and of course, publications. How are impact factors calculated, I hear you ask? Well, this is done based on databases like Scopus, like Web of Science, by looking at the number of articles published in a particular journal in the last 2 years, let's say 2007 and 2008, and then looking at the number of citations from the next year in all publications that indicate the journal from 2007 and 2008 as the source. So your journal impact factor is R, the number of citations in 2009, let's say, divided into the number of articles published in that journal in the last 2 years. So in this example, 2007 and 2008. And that will give us an impact factor for 2009 as we look at that particular journal and we assess it. Here you go in a graphical way, the number of articles cited during the previous 2 years divided by the number of citable articles in the journal during those 2 years. And that's how a journal impact factor is calculated. So we are looking for journals with high impact factors for our work in order that as researchers, we are able to maximize our citation rate. And of course, this feeds into academic impact. As we've discussed before in earlier presentations, this is becoming increasingly important across academia and beyond. We think, as you know, about research impact as academic impact, impact factor, citation rate, as well as socioeconomic, economic, and societal impact. So your citations are one part of the story. We would also encourage you to think about impact in terms of the good that researchers do in the world. How can you measure this? How can you capture this? And how can you quantify this as a researcher? Here's a checklist that comes from Kudos. Think about your projects during research, on publication, and on an ongoing basis. Put as many outputs as possible online, submit for posters and other speaking engagements, build up a network of people who are interested in your work. Connect your final publication to other related outputs, summarize your work in plain language, tell people when you've published. This is the one thing that most academics do actually do, but there's so much more that you can do to make sure that your work is known about, to make sure that your work is discoverable, and to make sure that people cite your work. Know your channels, know how you can disseminate your research, know how you can tell other people about your research depending on your region, depending upon where you are based. The tools and the channels that you might use will be different. In China, WeChat; in Central Asia, Instagram; in India, Egypt, for example, Facebook. So what will you use to tell your networks about your research? And we have strategies, don't we, for impact. Researchers are engaging with the public more than ever before, but most people have no idea how they benefit the public, how they benefit the general public. And so we are increasingly expected to articulate the value of our work with the public, to justify funding and demonstrate our impact. So you can do public engagement. You can do this better than you currently do, and you can assess the impact of your research, the attention, the interest, the desire, and the action by quantifying the different interactions that other people have with your cited and published research. Do you do this? Are you aware of the number of downloads, views, press coverage, and citations of your recent papers? You probably should be, because this is one important way to drive up your impact. We talk about capacity building, understanding and awareness, economic policy, health and well-being, cultural and other social aspects of our research as a way to drive up our impact and maximize our citations. Inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts are key things to look at, key things to think about as you evaluate your work from beginning to end as a journey along that scale of research impact. Here's another checklist. Are you thinking about design, representation, engagement, the early impact of your research, and as you reflect then and sustain those citations as a researcher into the future? There are many pathways to impact. Will you engage with the public? Will you engage with stakeholders? These are very, very important issues to consider as a researcher looking to maximize your citations, looking to boost the impact and citation rate of your research. And I encourage you to develop your presentation skill set. Look at ways in which you can tell stories about your research to engage people much better. Now we will talk about boosting those citations. And there are a number of tips that we have for you in order to do this as a researcher, writing up and publishing your academic work. And the first of them is to choose your keywords carefully. Make sure that you are ensuring that your research is discoverable online, that search engine optimization is happening. You do this with a title, with keywords, and with an effective abstract. 5 to 8 keywords. Search engines use these to find your work. And other workers also will use keywords when searching for literature, when using tools like the Researcher app, like ResearchGate, like many of the other online tools for searching and discovering academic literature. Different words to the title, absolutely key. Keep your keywords specific. Try to check to make sure that your keywords are not too general, and make sure that you use different keywords to those words in your title, because the search engines that are around, they use title words and they use keywords simultaneously to search and discover academic articles. So keep your title short and simple. The main issue, the subject, don't include infrequently used abbreviations, and make sure you attract people's attention. Studies have shown that shorter academic article titles are likely to be more highly cited. Your title should be effective. Here are some examples published that were highly cited in 2019. Don't forget that studies have shown that shorter titles are likely to be more highly cited. So that's tip number 1 for boosting your citations: effective keywords and an effective academic article title. Tip number 2, make sure that you use the same name on all your papers. Lots of people don't do this. The best way to do this now is to get an ORCID ID. Be unique. Make sure that you differentiate yourself from other authors with the same name. Be consistent on your articles. You'll often, in fact, need an ORCID ID, an ORCID researcher ID for your submissions these days anyway. So tip number 2, get yourself an ORCID ID. Tip number 3, disseminate and promote your research. As we've talked about already in this presentation, we are going on a journey. So not just once your work is published. Talk about your work, develop engagement. And I've given you lots of tips in this presentation already as to how you can do this. Key point is make sure people know about your work, not just after it gets published, but as you are doing the work and as you are disseminating after the work is published. Impact and therefore citations are a journey. We have talked about this already, but you have several pathways to impact. Are you going to engage just with stakeholders, just with other researchers who are interested in your research, or are you going to engage more widely with people who are much more generally interested in the outcomes of your study? This public engagement, widening the scope of your engagement, is one key way in which you can boost your citations. Impact is a journey. Download this checklist, use it in your own work. Imagine how amazing it would be to include something like this in your next grant application that actually has quantifiable numbers in it about your research publications. Tip number 4, cite within reason your own previously published papers. Don't go overboard because, of course, over-citation of your own work can be an issue, but recycle those submissions and show that your previous work forms a pattern. This is how you become a leader in your field. If you have questions about this or any other areas of academic publishing, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We can help you, but citing some of your own work in a balanced way alongside the citations of other workers in your research field, in your papers, is tip number 4 for boosting your citations. Tip number 5, make sure you publish in journals that other people in your field read. We talked about this already. Journal selection is key. Ensure your audience is engaged. Submit to key journals in your field in order that you can maximize your readership. How to do this? Look at the journals that other people, other key workers, other international colleagues in your field are writing and submitting their research to, and use those journals for your work as well. Tip number 6, try to publish in open access journals if you can. Most academic authors support open access. We have much higher reach to readers in open access journals, open research and open data. There are, of course, issues to do with cost and impact factor. We'll talk about those in a minute. But if more people have access to your research via open access journals, then you're going to boost your citation rate. And have a look at the Bentham Science Publisher range of open access journals as potential outlets for your next research project. Of course, open access literature is online, free of charge, and free of most copyright and licensing restrictions. We have other webinars, other training in this series designed to help colleagues understand what open access is. If you'd like to get access to any of our previous webinars, have a look at this YouTube channel, have a look at the Bentham Science Publishers YouTube channel, of course, as well. And journal selection and open access, it's a key issue. Be aware of the difference between a gold and a green open access journal. Is your open access journal fully gold? Is it only publishing fully open access with a fee, or are some of the papers also still present behind a pay wall? This is important to keep in mind. Another tip, number 7, for boosting your citations would be to write review papers. Writing these review papers is a key career step, but don't forget that you need to have an editor lined up and interested in your article beforehand. You need to make sure that you have that audience ready before writing a review paper. Usually these are invited by journal editors. Write to some of the editors at some of the Bentham Science Publisher journals. They may very well be interested in publishing one of your upcoming review papers. And don't forget to structure your review paper around a debated issue or question. People like to cite review papers because it saves time, saves space, and saves energy in their own articles. Tip number 8, submit to special issues. What about conference proceedings volumes? What about senior colleagues working in your area? Are they planning any special issues? You can also propose these yourself to journals. Again, get in touch with some of the Bentham Science Publisher journal editors and ask them, would you be interested in publishing a special issue that I'm going to put together with my colleagues working in my particular research area? So talk to editors, ask them about upcoming issues. And these special issues are highly cited. So these can be one-stop shops to enhancing your publication citation rate and impact. Tip number 9, of course, is to be collaborative. You won't boost your citations if you publish all your papers on your own. Work with colleagues. Collaborations are key anyway to a successful career. More publications, more opportunities for you. Enhance your personal network and enhance your impact and internationalize your research. Reach out to colleagues around the world and show them, tell them, talk to them about the work that you're doing. Maybe you'll develop collaborations. And of course, this is an effective way to boost your citations. If you publish a paper on your own, then only people in your own network are initially going to know about it. But if you publish with 10 other authors, let's say, then 10 times the size of personal network is going to know about the paper when it gets published. Tip number 10, it is of course that higher impact factor journals garner more citations. So as we've discussed already in this presentation, target your publications, select journals based on rank and impact factor, aim high, and learn to manage rejection. Because of course, if you submit to journals with higher impact factors, you're likely to get higher rejection rates. And so we can also help you with training in managing rejection. And we've talked about how you can check the impact factor of a journal. Look at the Web of Science, look at databases like Scopus. We covered that earlier on in our presentation today. Tip number 11, make sure you have a comprehensive reference list. Cite, but don't oversight. Cite your own work, as we've discussed. Cite across a range of languages if there are work published in other languages in your subject area. Travel back in time, cite papers that come from earlier in your field, and actually read papers. You'd be surprised how many authors citing work in their papers haven't actually read those papers, and so mistakes are introduced into the literature. We've talked about titles. Be smart with your title. Get a good title for your next paper that captures people's attention. Then they will read your work, then they will cite your work. Shorter titles get higher citation rates, and effective English comprises short sentences, limited words, less than 20 words if possible in an effective English sentence. Less is more. Are you asking an interesting question with your next research paper? And don't forget to include different words to the words in the keywords to maximize your search ability, to maximize your paper's discoverability. Allure, entice, and bring people into your research. We have talked about citation boosting in this presentation. Don't forget that readers are key. Many people write their academic papers just thinking about themselves, thinking about their own research groups. That's a mistake. Think about your readers. They are the people who will read, who will use, who will cite your academic articles. And of course, this is an important measure of academic impact, the key way that academics are assessed these days, like it or not. Here is a roadmap for successful academic publishing. Prepare to write. Learn how to sell your work to capture an editor's attention, and make sure you have a clear structure to your writing before you get going. And we can help you with effective writing. We can provide you with training, simple rules that can make a huge difference to your academic article writing. Thank you for listening. We have talked about two things in this presentation: impact and how to measure it, and how to maximize your citation rate. And I've provided you with 12 key tips that you can follow for maximizing the citations of your academic articles. The point of all of this is to help you be more effective as a writing and publishing academic. My name is Gareth Dyke. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a presentation brought to you by Top Edit Author Services and Bentham Science Publishers in collaboration with our colleagues at Diffusion Editing. Thanks again for listening, and I hope that you've learned a few things about how to boost your citations, maximize your potential, be as good as possible, be effective as an academic. Thank you again for listening. We hope to see you in another of our presentations very soon.